Manufacturing a lead-acid car battery does not begin with virgin metal or plastic fresh from petroleum. In many cases, it begins at the end. It begins when millions of exhausted batteries arrive at specialized recycling plants where they stop being hazardous waste and become the starting point for a new battery. The volume is immense. Every year, a gigantic quantity of batteries reaches the end of their useful life. Many still contain sulfuric acid inside. Lead remains in different chemical forms and a plastic casing contaminated by corrosive residues. None of that can be treated as common garbage. Lead is toxic, acid is highly corrosive, and both must be handled with very strict controls. Used batteries are first unloaded in large collection areas. From there, they pass to a line where the separation of materials begins. The first step is to drain the acid. That liquid, which for years enabled the chemical reaction inside the battery, is extracted and led to treatment systems. There it is filtered, stabilized, and neutralized through the addition of alkaline compounds. That neutralization transforms an aggressive waste into a much safer substance usable for other industrial purposes. But the true core of the process is in the lead. A used battery contains a large amount of that metal distributed among plates, grids, internal connectors, and active paste adhered to the electrodes. Recovering it is essential because lead remains the heart of the new battery. The empty units move along conveyor belts and enter an industrial crusher. There, the plastic casing, the separators, and the metallic parts are broken at the same time. Afterward, the material passes through a mill that further reduces the size of the fragments. What comes out of that stage no longer resembles a battery. It is an irregular mixture of plastic, lead, chemical sludge, and metallic particles. Then, one of the smartest stages of recycling comes into action: hydrodynamic separation. In large tanks or water classification systems, materials behave according to their density. Plastic floats, lead and heavy fractions sink. In this way, the plant manages to divide into two distinct streams, something that minutes before was a complex and dangerous waste. The separated plastic is washed and prepared for reuse. Later, it will return to the industry turned into small beads or pellets, raw material for molding new casings. Lead, on the other hand, follows a much tougher path. It is still dirty, mixed with chemical compounds and moisture. It is not yet fit to manufacture anything. In parallel, the water used during the process cannot be discarded without treatment either. It carries metallic contaminants and fine residues. Therefore, it passes through stages of chemical cleaning, decantation, and filtering. The solids precipitate and form a dense sludge that also contains recoverable lead. That mud is reincorporated into the metallic stream so as not to waste valuable material. The logic of the entire plant is clear. Almost everything is recovered, almost nothing is lost. Once all the lead fractions are gathered, the material enters drying. Residual moisture would be a serious problem in the melting stage because it would alter the furnace temperature and hinder refining. For this reason, the solids pass through industrial dryers that remove the adhered water. Only then can the lead be subjected to extreme heat. The dry mixture is loaded into a melting furnace. Here, the process stops looking like a conventional recycling operation and enters fully into the realm of heavy metallurgy. High temperatures melt the lead and separate a large part of the impurities. The matter changes state, becomes incandescent, and begins to purify. Contaminants float or form slag that can be removed. Sometimes components are added to improve specific properties of the refined metal, such as corrosion resistance or the electrical behavior of the alloys. After the furnace comes fine refining. The liquid lead is transferred to containers where its composition is adjusted and the last impurities are removed. Only then does it reach the necessary purity to return to the manufacturing chain. The final result of this stage of the process is compact, uniform ingots ready to be transformed. Those ingots are much more than blocks of metal. They are the bridge between the exhausted battery and the new battery. What left the car as toxic waste returns to the industry as high-value raw material. And there begins the second part of the story, the manufacturing of the internal components that will make it possible to store and deliver energy. A lead-acid battery works thanks to a set of plates submerged in electrolyte. It is these plates that store chemical energy and convert it into electrical energy when the vehicle needs it. Therefore, once the refined lead ingots are obtained, the next mission consists of transforming them into thin, resistant electrodes capable of withstanding thousands of charge and discharge cycles. Everything starts with the metal. The refined lead is melted again and converted into suitable shapes for rolling or expansion. From there, strips or sheets are produced that must meet a contradictory demand. They have to be thin to allow for many active surfaces within a compact battery, but they must also be robust enough not to deform during assembly or use. On the production lines, large rolling machines progressively reduce the thickness of the lead. The metal passes between rollers that flatten it with enormous precision. What was initially a thick mass ends up converted into a thin band. Then that band enters equipment that cuts and expands it to generate a metallic mesh. That mesh will be the carrier grid of the plate. The grid fulfills a dual function. On one hand, it acts as a physical skeleton and supports the active matter. On the other hand, it serves as an internal conductor because the current generated in the chemical reaction will circulate through it. If that structure fails, the battery loses performance, starting capacity, and useful life. But the grid alone is not enough. It cannot store energy yet. For that, it needs to be coated with a paste composed mainly of lead oxide and other additives. That active paste is one of the most important elements of the entire battery. Its composition determines how much it can be charged, what current it can deliver, how long it lasts, and how it behaves in the face of high temperatures or deep discharges. The application of that paste is done with pasting machines. The grids move forward while receiving a uniform layer of the reactive material. The thickness must be carefully controlled. If paste is missing, capacity decreases. If there is too much, the plate can become unstable and crack more easily. Uniformity is critical because it ensures that all battery cells work evenly. Once pasted, the plates pass through initial drying stages. The goal is not to harden them completely, but to remove part of the surface moisture and stabilize the paste. Then they enter curing chambers, where temperature and humidity are controlled for many hours. In that phase, physical and chemical changes occur that consolidate the union between the grid and the active matter. The plate gains mechanical strength and prepares for the next transformation. In a lead-acid battery, not all plates are the same. There are positive plates and negative plates. Although they start from a similar structure, each is destined to play a different role within the cell. The final composition and subsequent chemical treatment allow some to function as a positive electrode and others as a negative electrode during service. After curing, the plates are sorted, trimmed, and grouped. Here a key fact appears. A single lead-acid cell delivers approximately 2 volts. That means that to obtain a 12-volt automobile battery, 6 cells connected in series are needed. And inside each cell, there is not just one positive plate and one negative plate, but several alternating sets to increase the reaction surface and current capacity. That is why the manufacturing of plates is not measured only by individual quality, but also by volume. Many plates are needed per battery and millions per year in a large plant. The industrial challenge is enormous, producing them fast, maintaining constant thicknesses, avoiding defects, and ensuring that each one responds the same as the others. Between positive and negative plates, separators are placed, generally made of microporous polymeric materials. Their mission is to prevent direct contact between electrodes of different signs. If they were to touch, the cell would suffer an internal short circuit. But the separator cannot be a total barrier. It must let the electrolyte pass and allow the ionic exchange necessary for the chemical reaction. It has to insulate electrically, but open the way chemically. When the plates and separators are ready, packets are formed. Those packets are aligned and compressed with precision. Afterward, the plates of the same sign are connected to each other by lead bridges. In this way, a positive group and a negative group are created within each cell. The quality of those joints is also decisive. A poor internal connection causes losses, heating, and premature failures. What comes out of this stage already looks much more like a real battery. The chemistry is prepared. The metal already has a functional shape. The plates are ready, the groups are assembled, but it still needs to be enclosed in a resistant casing, join the 6 cells, fill them with electrolyte, and definitively activate the system. With the plates already manufactured and grouped, the moment for final assembly arrives. Here, the battery stops being a collection of industrial components and becomes a sealed unit, ready to store energy and withstand years of service in a vehicle. The first visible element is the casing. Although from the outside it looks like a simple plastic box, in reality it must fulfill several critical functions. It has to resist vibrations, shocks, temperature variations, chemical splashes, and the internal pressure generated under certain working conditions. Additionally, its interior must house 6 independent compartments for the 6 cells connected in series. Those casings are usually manufactured with recycled and reprocessed plastic coming largely from old batteries. The material is melted, injected into molds, and takes the final shape of the container. Thus, the recovery cycle is also completed in the external part of the battery. Inside each compartment, a set of alternating positive and negative plates with their separators is introduced. The internal arrangement is carefully calculated. The goal is the largest possible active surface in the smallest volume, because a starter battery must deliver a very high current in a few seconds. That requires an enormous contact surface between the active material and the electrolyte. Once the groups are placed in their respective cells, the internal connections are made. The plates of the same sign are already grouped, but now each cell must be linked to the next to reach the total voltage. Since each cell contributes about 2 volts, the 6 together deliver about 12.6 volts when the battery is fully charged. That is the typical voltage needed to start most conventional automobiles. Then the upper part of the casing is welded or fused with its cover. The exterior terminals remain firmly integrated into the internal assembly. It is those terminals that will later be connected to the car's electrical system. Everything must remain aligned, hermetic, and structurally solid. An acid leak, a bad weld, or a poorly sealed cover can ruin the battery even before it leaves the factory. Next comes one of the most delicate steps, filling with electrolyte. In a lead-acid battery, the electrolyte is a solution of sulfuric acid in water. That liquid not only fills the space between plates, it is an active part of the electrochemical reaction. Without it, the plates cannot behave as functional electrodes. The filling must be done with exact volume, controlled concentration, and safe conditions, because any deviation affects the final performance. However, a newly assembled and newly filled battery is not yet ready to start a car. Its plates contain active material in an initial form that must still be electrically transformed. For that, there is the stage of formation or initial charging. In enormous charging rooms, thousands of batteries are connected to industrial electrical systems. For hours, they receive controlled current. That electricity triggers the chemical reaction that defines the functional state of the plates. Part of the material is transformed into lead dioxide at the positive electrode, while the negative one acquires its spongy form of active lead. At that moment, the battery is truly born as an operational electrochemical device. This stage consumes an enormous amount of energy. It is not a simple test. It is an activation process. The current enters, chemically reorganizes the interior, and leaves the battery prepared to store and return electricity. From then on, when the driver turns the key or presses the start button, the battery will be able to deliver a powerful discharge to the starter motor and simultaneously power other electrical systems. After formation, the battery passes through quality controls. Voltage, air tightness, connection resistance, external appearance, and in many cases behavior under load are verified. Some units are also subjected to vibration or thermal resistance tests depending on the type of application. The idea is simple. A defective battery not only fails, but it can also generate serious problems in the vehicle. Once control is passed, labeling arrives. Technical data, safety warnings, polarity, capacity, cranking current, and traceability codes are added. From there, the battery is packaged and distributed. It leaves the plant converted into an apparently discrete but absolutely essential component. The most notable thing is that inside that box there is nothing digital, nothing sophisticated to the naked eye, nothing that suggests modern complexity. And yet it concentrates a formidable combination of industrial recycling, metallurgical refining, chemical design, and mass production. The lead-acid battery remains one of the most resistant and current technologies in the automobile. Not because it is new, but because it effectively solves a brutal task, delivering in seconds enough energy to wake up a machine of hundreds or thousands of kilos, and it all starts with a silent reaction between lead and acid, enclosed in a casing that almost no one looks at twice. Every time a car turns the key, there is a silent part that springs into action before all others. It is full of lead, acid, and pure chemistry. It seems simple from the outside, but on the inside it is the result of a brutal, precise, and dangerous industrial process. This is how a lead-acid car battery is made.